Hey everyone, so One Piece chapter 1083 just came out, and while this was a phenomenal chapter, I feel like this was the chapter before the chapter. What do I mean by that? Well, for the last several years, the most anticipated character reveal in all of One Piece has been Im. We want to see Im's face. We want to understand who this character is. We want to see this character interact with somebody, maybe Sabo, who knows. We want to see what the final antagonist of One Piece looks like. Because let's be honest, Im is set up as so many factors at this point. The fact that we're getting 9 God's Knights serving under Im, the symbolism that we've had throughout the story of the idea that Luffy as the holder, the bearer of the will of D, the D tribe, the natural enemies of the gods, the final opponent of the story likely being the god of the world. I don't know, Im is very, 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 very likely to be the final villain of One Piece, and this chapter makes it seem very likely that within the next chapter or two, we are going to get to see Im himself. So, I'm going to get into why that is as we go. There are several other things to discuss about this chapter. Of course, there is one thing that I want to address from last chapter, because last chapter, I had some criticism for Dragon, and I still do. I think a lot of people didn't understand my criticism of Dragon. I said that Dragon should never have doubted Sabo. What people responded with was, well, Dragon didn't doubt Sabo, he just wanted to wait to see whether or not it was true, whether Sabo killed King Cobra or not. Obviously, Dragon didn't want to believe it, but he wanted to affirm it with his own eyes. And I understand that. That's not good enough. Not for a One Piece character, not for a One Piece protagonist character, okay? Because the standard that I'm holding Dragon to is the same standard that I would hold Luffy to, or Whitebeard to, or Shanks to. Because when a character in One Piece is told that, hey, your close friend, a member of your family, right? If a good guy character in One Piece is told that, hey, someone you love, someone that you have close bonds with, someone that you fought through thick and thin with, right? Your Nakama, essentially. If somebody tells you that your Nakama has committed murder, committed a terrible crime, something like that, the response is not, well, I have to wait and see if it's true. The response is, no way, they would never do that because I know them. This has happened multiple times throughout the story. We have seen Luffy, I present to you 2 pages. Luffy being told that Nami killed Usopp, and Luffy downright knowing right away that this is not true because he refuses to believe it. Luffy being told that Robin assassinated Iceberg, which, by the way, is a 1-to-1 example identical to what Dragon believes that Sabo did. Only difference is that Luffy knows Robin way less than Dragon knows Sabo at this point. Dragon knows Sabo as a son at this point, whereas Robin is just one of Luffy's newer crewmates. But even then, Luffy is adamant he does not believe for a second that Robin would do this. That is the difference. That is camaraderie. That is faith in your companions. That is a world of difference from reading one newspaper article and saying, well, maybe Sabo did it. I hope he didn't, but let's wait and see and find out. And if he did do it, I'm going to be very angry. You might respond with, well, Luffy had that one incident with Zoro back in Whiskey Peak, and I think most people would agree that was an all-time character low moment for Luffy. From all of the bonds that we got to see him develop with his crewmates over the course of East Blue, the level of faith and trust that they had in one another, I think most people would agree that Luffy getting really angry at Zoro and legitimately thinking that Zoro might have killed these villagers because they didn't make him his food, I think most people view that as like a really out-of-character moment for Luffy and one that we don't ever want to see again. I would also add that Luffy's one weakness in terms of his judge of character is food. So with Luffy having the 2 brain cells he does, I think we could maybe excuse him doubting Zoro in that moment because food is his one weakness, and he couldn't believe that villagers who gave him food would lie about, Zoro potentially attacking them. So his brain kind of broke in that moment because food, But we're not talking about Luffy with 2 brain cells here. We're talking about Dragon, right? The mastermind behind the world's most complex organization, who has dealt with the world government and their lies and propaganda for years and years and years. And this character, Sabo, who he has raised as a son for the last decade, all it takes is one piece of world government propaganda for him to immediately be like, oh well, it might be true. Sabo might just be a crazy murderous psychopath all along. I cannot believe that this man has been running the Revolutionary Army for years. What happens anytime a piece of news article pops up that says that one of his Revolutionary Army commanders in West Blue did something bad? Does he immediately jump to, oh my god, I gotta disown that entire chain? I don't understand it. This man is stupid or has zero faith in his companions. Pick your poison, but he does not live up to the standards of what we expect in One Piece in terms of trust and faith in your comrades. It's just not there. So I stand by my criticism of Dragon. I don't know if there's anything that can be done for the character that would change my mind on that, because I just think that that's a terrible moment. I guess we just overlook it and move on. I don't know, but it is very hard for me to wrap my head around that reaction that he had in the newspaper, and nothing that happened this chapter really changed my view of that. So my criticism from previous chapter still stands. All of that stuff aside, you guys obviously want to talk about, I guess, the Holy Knights first. No, let's talk about the Admiral. So I always find it funny when people say that Oda doesn't care about power scaling. I think Oda definitely does care about power scaling, because I think that One Piece is one of those verses where you can see, the entire story is arguably about power scaling. It's about climbing up the rungs of the ladder bit by bit, getting stronger and stronger till eventually you are top of the seas, king of the world. You are the strongest, right? You are the king of the pirates. Roger brought the entire pirate world to heel through Haki. That is what Kaido explained. That is what the fight for One Piece is. The top dog will come out, as the top dog. They're going to have the prize. They're going to hold the belt at the end of the day. I find it very difficult to believe that a lot of people think Oda doesn't care about power scaling at this point, because, the tiers, I think people can get caught up in, what are the nitty gritties of it, right? But I think we all vaguely understand that, look, Oda's kind of saying that the top commanders of Yonko, they're not as strong as admirals, but admirals, they're not quite as strong as a Yonko, right? Or at least the traditional Yonko, Kaido, Whitebeard, Shanks, etc. And that's the general gist of it, right? We don't need to get into the nitty-gritty, but Oda was really talking about power scaling quite a bit this chapter. He was like, alright, so listen, these admirals, if they were allowed to go all out, which they are not, as he spelled out very bluntly, they would probably win. Or they would win, right? They would turn this whole battlefield upside down or whatever. But they are not allowed to do so they are not doing that. So that is why the Revolutionary Army commanders are able to hold their own. However, it is still impressive that the Revolutionary Army commanders are able to hold their own. He spelled it all out for us, I think, pretty on the nose, so that there's no misinterpretations or anything like that. This is the best it's pretty much gonna get, right? I think that an author can't be more on the nose with power scaling than this without it just getting really weird. In terms of the actual action, Karasu, obviously, he's got a cooler ability. He's just gonna be a cooler, more popular character than Morley. I imagine Karasu's gonna probably pick up a good number of fans over the next, couple of chapters or so. The suit ability, I think that this is a really I'm assuming it's a Logia. I feel like it's a very creative way to showcase a Logia, because it's not a raw power type Logia ability, like magma or lightning or anything like that. But clearly the way he's able to manipulate his body to create crows that almost act independently when he's split off into those bodies and everything, and kind of, it feels more, a lot of his attacks feel more crocodile-ish, creating sort of not weapons exactly, but attacking with constructs, I suppose, made out of suit, but at the same time the greater versatility of turning into crows and having the crows do independent things. I like that quite a bit. Fujitora and Green Bull, they're not made to look that cool this chapter, but that's because that's not what this chapter is about. I thought that the panel of Morley, fighting Green Bull straight up, that looked really, it was just a very visually cool chapter, or image, in the chapter of, big giant with a trident strapping this giant talking ant tree type creature. Whether or not Fujitora should be able to deal with this without having to call down meteors, that is up to your interpretation or whatever of what he is capable of doing. How much are these admirals really holding back? How much should they be able to do without relying on their fruits and Haki? That's all, that's all its own stuff. But point being, I thought the action from the chapter was cool. I thought that Oda did a good job showcasing the revolutionary commanders without making the admirals look bad, because he explained why they can't do everything they can do. That aside, we've got to talk about No, we're not going to talk about the Holy Knights just yet. Let's briefly touch on the strategy that the Revolutionary Army is employing, which leads to the Holy Knights. I like the idea that there is a thought out method, I suppose, to the madness in terms of what the Revolutionary Army is doing, because initially it definitely felt like the Revolutionary Army went in there with really vague purposes and everything got ruined and their plan was in shambles, and the Revolutionary Army back home, at Ivankov's Island, is reading the newspaper and freaking out because everything went wrong. And for us, the reader, it's like, what was even the plan? What were you guys trying to do? Was it just to try to get Kuma back? What was the goal here, right? So the goal is established. Declaring war on the world government, well, specifically on the Celestial Dragons. I like that. I felt like maybe that could have been done with, well, they wanted to do it in a dramatic way, right? So they did it in a dramatic way. That's cool. Getting Kuma back, which is cool. That's important, right? I'm surprised that Dragon didn't read something in the newspaper about how Kuma's just a bad dude now and he hates the Revolutionary Army and didn't just believe that. Because honestly, that's basically the dude. I'm serious. Just think about his reaction for a moment and think about if he's swayed that easily by a piece of paper saying that Sabo killed somebody and he's immediately like, well, it might have happened, might not have happened. We gotta wait and find out. Instead of just being like, no, obviously this is a lie because I know Sabo. He raised him like a son. I trust this person. He's my comrade. That's what you kind of expect here. But somehow on the other hand, they how come when Kuma joined the Shichibukai, they never were like, well, maybe Kuma just hates us now and is totally evil or something like that by this logic, How come Dragon was just like, well, obviously something must be up. We've got to go risk life and limb to go save Kuma because there's absolutely no way that he would voluntarily become a Shichibukai, etc. I don't know. It just doesn't add up. The Dragon, whatever. But with Kuma, they got him back, check. The biggest thing that stood out to me was the strategy in terms of how they're going to start waging this war, right? Because I don't think that when it comes to large-scale wars and everything like that in One Piece, be that Marineford, be that Onigashima, I don't think Oda puts too much time into thinking out, because Oda's already got to do so much stuff, right? In the context of these battles, matchups, etc. I don't think he puts too much time into laying out the nitty gritty of like the X's and O's, I suppose, of how the strategy of the war needs to play out. So with them heading to Onigashima, for example, there was some thought in terms of, okay, you attack from this entrance, and then you guys go around with the submarine to this part of it, and then we kind of coordinate, and then we surprise attack them like that. And that was the gist of the strategy, and then, the rest of the battle wasn't really about strategy. Same thing with Marineford. There was some nice strategy in terms of the formations that Whitebeard used, then what the world government tried to use in terms of their walls and everything like that to trap them, and how Whitebeard and his crew were able to get past that, etc. But for the most part, I don't think strategy was the main focus of Marineford. It was an underlying aspect of it, right? With the Revolutionary Army versus the world government, I like the idea that Oda is laying out a very clear and, I think, interesting strategy that will set the foundation for what a lot of the combat we can see from here on is going to be about, which is a siege, right? And it makes so much sense because Marijoa is ultimately, as it's spelled out for us, it's a fortress, right? A perfect fortress, but fortresses are always vulnerable to siege warfare. And Marijoa, it's the ultimate fortress. It's so far high up. So with that in mind, I like the route that Oda went with because it's one that I don't know, how many readers would have really thought of something like that, which is just take out their food supply, and suddenly it becomes a conflict of trying to attack their supplies and resources as they're trying to get things back to Marija over and over, and that creates spaces for battlegrounds, that creates spaces for surprise attacks, ambushes, things like that. It just turns it makes it so that I guess the reason I really, really like it is because it makes it so that Marijoa doesn't just turn into a battleground right away itself, because that would be too early. We need to save that for the endgame. But it makes it so that the rest of the sea can sort of become a bit of a battleground. And I know we're not going to focus on that too much, probably because the Straw Hat Pirates are going to be the main focus for the most part. And the Straw Hat Pirates are probably not going to be that involved just yet. But at the same time, we can probably cut into small conflicts that are happening as, the Holy Knights are trying to do their thing and probably try to get food back to Marijoa, and Revolutionary Army is getting to interact with maybe the Holy Knights or Marines or whoever's trying to get supplies back to Marijoa, and those little interactions become small battlegrounds that it gives the feeling of an overall war that's being fought without Oda having to push all the pieces onto the table right away. So I really, really do like that setup. It took me a little bit to really fully appreciate that, because I think I had to reread the chapter a little bit to be like, okay, they did 3 goals, how important were all these 3 goals? And it was like, this one's symbolic, this one's more of a personal thing because they want Kuma back. Okay, this one's actually really, really good, not just strategically, but also really, really good for the story and how it's going to set up the story going forward. So all that being said, the reason the Holy Knights I'm very excited for, because I think it sets up potentially, 9 Holy Knights, 9 Straw Hats, I mean, it doesn't take a genius to think that maybe these are just the final opponents for the Straw Hats, and we just learned about the final matchups that the Straw Hats are going to have. I have a full video about that coming out Tuesday, so watch out for that. But the bigger thing is that I feel like this is the chapter before the chapter, because what we're leading, the incident that's sort of being skirted around here, right, is what happened with Sabo and Cobra. We know that Sabo realized that there's someone sitting on the empty throne, so we know that there is a big climactic scene that we are leading up to that was basically the spark for everything that happened, right? The destruction of Lulusia Kingdom, all of that, and that has to involve Sabo seeing Im's face. So with the introduction, we found out about Im's subordinates, everything like that this chapter. Maybe we get to see one of them or something like that next chapter, but most likely we're gonna get to see Im in the next 1 to 2 chapters. I wouldn't be surprised if next chapter's cliffhanger is Sabo getting to see Im's face, because we're actually getting to see what happened at Reverie, you know? So many of us were like, oh man, the Reverie arc, it got cut short, but it really didn't. It just got split into 2 mini arcs, I suppose. One before Wano, one, I guess, after Wano, in the middle of Egghead. And this is the perfect time to introduce him, because we're starting the final saga. It's time for us to see the final antagonist of the story, so that the rest of the final saga can play out with us having a face to the, you know, a face to the name, a face to the villain. The last thing to quickly discuss is the potential little theory going around that the God Knight in the middle is evil Shanks or twin Shanks or clone Shanks or whatever. It does go back to the silhouette does seem to match some depictions of Shanks, so I can kind of see that. And then the other thing is that there was, you know, Shanks was talking to the Gorosei not too many chapters, I mean 200 or so chapters ago, and that always was a little questionable to a lot of readers in terms of the scar and everything like that. Why is that missing from the design? I don't want to jump on the train. I really don't want to jump on the evil Shanks train, because it just, I think it would be really cool. But at the same time, it's also just like, I would rather be pleasantly surprised than start putting all my, than start hoping for there to be an evil Shanks or something like that, you know? But it would make a lot of sense why he's so casually able to walk up and talk to the Gorosei, right? At the end of the day, even for a pacifistic Yonko like Shanks, that is a pretty crazy thing for him to be able to do, but if it's one of the God's Knights that's coming up to do it, that would be really cool. And it also creates the really interesting scenario where, let's say that Shanks was actually evil Shanks, right? The God Knight version of Shanks. It actually would mean that when he's saying, I need to talk to you about a certain pirate, it would be so hilarious, so incredibly hilarious if all of us were wrong. When that chapter came out, we had all these predictions. People were like, maybe he's talking about Luffy, maybe he's talking about Kaido, maybe he's talking about Blackbeard, right? Those are the options that are being thrown out. Which pirate could he be talking about, right? Because we thought it's actual Shanks talking to the Gorosei. It'd be so funny if the pirate that this guy is talking about, if it is in fact evil Shanks, a God Knight, if the pirate he's talking about is Shanks, because not a single person could have predicted that, right? Go back in time to chapter whatever, 900 whatever, when that first came out. It's like, I need to talk to you about a certain pirate. All these theories, it's like, which pirate? Luffy, Blackbeard, Kaido, which pirate? It's like, what if the pirate Shanks is talking about is Shanks? I don't think anybody had that at that time, because it just wouldn't have made sense, but, you know, it's Oda, so at the end of the day, some of the surprises are going to be things that nobody can ever see coming, right? But that's enough. I can't believe I devoted that much time talking about this evil Shanks theory. It's just, I know it's catching fire right now. I don't want to just get bought into it, but I guess I did buy into it a little bit and just talked about it a bit there. But yeah, that's all for this. I will talk to you guys later.